Okay, with that, we'll have our Sunday school session. We'll turn our attention again to Brother Rich, who will speak on Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.
Well, good morning again, brothers and sisters, young people. Great to see a full house. I love it. Hey, what a great way to start a Sunday morning. That was great. I loved it. All right. We come to our last class of this gathering, outside of the exhortation, of course. In this particular topic, we're going to be taking a look at the prophet Samuel. So he was the last judge, and we're going to take a look at his life, some of the kind of trials that he went through. We're going to see how God was working through Samuel, obviously, to bring about his purpose, to glorify his name. And then we'll talk a little bit about Saul today, this morning, and then, we'll kind of talk a little bit about Saul during the exhortation as well, maybe pull in David. We'll see. So, Samuel, last judge of Israel, and a really remarkable man. Okay, in a lot of ways, brothers and sisters, he's kind of saved Israel from destruction by the Philistines. All right, anyways, people have been clamoring for the recap. Well, here it is. We talked about Samuel last night. 20 years, lived along the border of Judah and Dan, had a weakness for Philistine women. We all know the deal. Last one set the stage for more revolts against the hated Philistines, led by the prophet Samuel. So, like we talked about last night, the events of Samson's life really set the stage for the continuation of this really epic struggle between two peoples. And again, there you go. Where's my pointer? Oh, here we go. Remember, brothers and sisters, right? They're kind of hemmed in right here in the mountains of Israel, the hill country of Ephraim. We're talking about this area right here primarily, where our story is going to take place. But all right, the account of Samuel begins in 1 Samuel chapter 1, and it's a wonderful story of faith. It's a wonderful story of perseverance, particularly with Hannah. Hannah was barren, and if we take a look at it, there are some wonderful. Do I have my glasses? Yeah. There are some wonderful parallels between Hannah and Mary, the mother of Jesus. So let's take a look at 1 Samuel, the first chapter. We have the children of Israel coming up to worship up to Shiloh. And if you take a look at verse 3, and this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. We'll talk a little bit more about them as we go on. But Hannah is going, and Hannah is, as the chapter says, was in, deep distress, deep spiritual distress, because number one, she couldn't have children, and number two, her adversary, the other wife, was kind of sticking it to Hannah. Okay, and it was very troubling to her, and she's praying to God for deliverance from this issue, and she's praying for children, obviously. And Eli makes a false assumption. He made an assumption about Hannah that she was drunk or being disrespectful during this time. And the fact of the matter is, it wasn't. She wasn't. She was just in deep distress and really praying hard for deliverance from this issue. But as I was saying, Hannah's prayer of deliverance and Mary's prayer as well. Take a look at it when you have a chance, right? The similarities are really beautiful. And we have that echo going back, when we read Mary's prayer of salvation, I think in Luke the second chapter, and compare it to Hannah's. It's really wonderful. But anyways, Hannah's prayer is going to be answered by God, and he's going to give, Samuel to Hannah. But she, in turn, gives him back, right, to God. Really amazing, right? She's been praying and praying and praying for this, to have a child, and she has this child and gives him back to God in Shiloh. I think that's just, a wonderful story of commitment to God, about faith in God, about love for God. And anyways, we read that account. Hannah is going to be blessed, I think, with 4 more children after this. So, yeah. So Samuel is going to grow up in this environment in Shiloh. Shiloh, as we're going to find out, was the center of worship during this time. It wasn't Jerusalem. Okay, Shiloh had been a place of worship in the land of Canaan for thousands of years, even before the Hebrews got into the land by the Canaanites. And so we'll take a look at that as well. So he's going to see the good. He's going to see all of the rituals. He's going to see, the structure of the tabernacle and all of the things, how to run a temple rituals, all the rituals of the temple. And so he's going to see the good and the bad. Here's this little kid, and he's going to grow up in this environment. In a lot of ways, it was a wonderful spiritual environment. And in other ways, it was a really bad environment, as we're going to see. All right. Okay, so Shiloh is a very important part of Israel's history. In fact, if we look at Judges, the 18th chapter, it's actually going to be the place where Joshua is going to divide the land. In verse 18, Judges 18, verse 1. In those days, there was no... Is that the right one? 18 divided... I think that's Joshua, actually, not Judges. Hold on. Lee, I told you not to put Judges up there. All right, it is Joshua. All right, Joshua 18, verse 1. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there, and the land was subdued before them. That's not the whole land, by the way, brothers and sisters. It's the area in and around Shiloh, right? That area had been subdued. So they get into the land, and now Shiloh is going to be the center of worship for the children of Israel. And this is during the time of the judges, and also during the time of Samuel as well. This is going to be the center of worship. The tabernacle is going to be set up there. Not the temple, of course, but the tabernacle itself is going to have a permanent residence in Shiloh on this hill. Okay? I never realized that before, brothers and sisters. This is one of the things you read this story over and over again, and you miss a lot of stuff, or it doesn't make a connection inside of your brain. But yeah, Shiloh is a very important part. In Judges 21, verse 19, this is very interesting. I think this is actually Judges. We'll see. It is. I know this was right. All right, Judges 21, verse 19. Without getting to the background, Benjamin had been really wiped out by their brethren, Israel, and, they were looking for wives or whatever. But in verse 19 of the 21st chapter of Judges, then they said, behold, there is a feast of the Lord in Shiloh yearly in a place which is on the north side of Bethel, east side, so on and so forth. So during the time of the judges, they were having festivals there. They were going there to bring sacrifices. All of the rituals of the temple and the tabernacle were taking place in Shiloh. All right? So when we think about Judges and we think about Samuel, just have it in the back of your mind that Shiloh was the center of worship for Yahweh during the time of the judges. That is not going to change until the time of David. All right? Where I think they went to I forget where. I'm not going to say any names because it's probably wrong. But anyways, it rested. Remember, they were trying to bring the ark up, and was it Uzziah that touched it, right? Saying that, yes, Uzzah. Thank you. And he, he's going to lose his life. Anyways, for over 200 years, Shiloh was the resting place of the tabernacle and center of Yahweh worship. It was run by the Levites, right, as found in the law. Eli and his sons, and Hophni and Phinehas, right? And so, as we're going to find out, that Hophni and Phinehas were not great people. They were actually pretty evil people, and were taking advantage of their position of power during this time. And unfortunately, Eli didn't really do anything about it, right? They should have been removed as priests, but that never happened. Did I? Yes. Boom. Boom. Okay. Shiloh is what is called a temenos. All right, it's a Greek word, and usually in Greek culture, these were areas that were set aside for a god or a deity. All right. Now we know that Shiloh had been a place of worship long before the Hebrews got into the land. But when the Hebrews came in, they kind of took over this very special place, which happened all the time. In fact, like during the Christian era, when the Christians would, like, say, invade like an area that was controlled by the Muslims, right? They would knock down the mosque, and what would they build on top? Boom. They would build a church, right? When the conquistadors came into Mexico City, they destroyed one of the great, the great pyramids right there. And what did they put on top of it? They put a massive church that you can actually go and see today. And so this happens all the time. And so Israel's going to come in. The Hebrews are going to come in. The place is abandoned, right, because of all the chaos that's going on with the Sea Peoples and the Bronze Age collapse. So this place was empty, but they knew it had special significance. And so this is where they're going to set up the tabernacle, all right? And so in this case, Shiloh was the divine place of Yahweh. Okay, so it was a sacred place, or it should have been a sacred place. We're going to find out it's not. Was a religious site before the conquest. Very secluded area, very small secluded area, about 8 acres, and it's located about 20 miles from Jerusalem in the hill country of Ephraim. Now this is important, brothers and sisters, because we know that Ephraim is going to become a big player in Israel politics. In fact, they're going to be the most probably the strongest of the nations, particularly in the north after Solomon, the split. And so there's really going to be a rivalry, right, between the northern tribes, as we know, and the southern tribes. Who's going to control the future of the Hebrew people? Is it going to be the tribe of Judah down in the south, or is it going to be the tribe of Ephraim up in the north? And we're going to find out that after the reign of Solomon, there's so much animosity, particularly around taxes and control and stuff like that, that we know that there's going to be a split, right? And they're going to go their separate ways. But that wasn't the case during this time. All right, excellent acoustics here. They found that there was really like great acoustics in this area because of kind of the layout of the land. So when the people would all be gathered together, all the people, I think I was talking to somebody about this, like how did they all hear the law and stuff like that? Well, this would be a perfect spot because all the people would come together and they would hear the law, and they could hear it, everybody, because of the acoustics that are there. They did some type of experiments or something like that, and I guess this area, you can just, it's great acoustics, I guess. There was a permanent structure here. We know that the tabernacle was made to travel back and forth because when it was built, they were still wandering in the wilderness. Well, they're making a transition now to a more settled life. So what are they going to do? Well, we're going to put our tabernacle right here on this sacred spot. We're taking it over, right? We're taking over your sacred spot. We're taking over the land. All right, and that's exactly what Israel did. And so we'll take a look at a recreation of what Shiloh looked like. But, this was a fairly large complex. So it wasn't just the tabernacle itself. There were dwelling places for the priests. There were storage places for all of the grains that were brought as offerings. There were places to keep animals. There were places to sacrifice animals, as we know. So a pretty busy complex every single day. People were coming constantly. Then you add to all of the different yearly sacrifices that took place. And this really, brothers and sisters, was the center of Israel's culture. Okay, when you're thinking about a center, a place of Israel's culture, think about Shiloh during this time. Okay, massive storage rooms, silos to hold the grain offerings we just talked about. This is pretty fascinating. This is like, of all the things that they've found, this is pretty cool. They found a clay pomegranates everywhere along this site, and so that's a particular Jewish thing. That's a particular Hebrew thing when it comes to worship, right? Because the priests were supposed to have that, right? At the hem of their garments, bells and pomegranates on the hem of the priest's garments. Well, over to the right-hand side, right here, look at. We have a little pomegranate right here. All right. And, I wonder how they, put this hole in here. They had to have some type of drill, right? Have some type of drill to do this. So, it wasn't just like you're just picking up a rock or whatever and sticking it onto your clothes. It took some time. So that was pretty interesting. They also found a 4-horned altar there as well, which coincides with the account in Exodus of the tabernacle. Okay. So again, here is archaeology confirming that the Hebrews were in the land, number one, but number two, had a pretty major complex, a pretty major religious complex, right? People that aren't living in a place are not going to set up permanent structures. That just doesn't happen, okay? So that tells us that they were actually settled in this area to the point where they could bring grain offerings and meat offerings to Shiloh, to the tabernacle. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that the economy must have been pretty good, okay? If they're still bringing grain and they're still bringing extra things to the tabernacle, they had things to give. Like during the famine, you're not going to give your flour to the priests. You're going to eat it because there's a famine, right? But if things are going well and people are making a living and farming is great and your crops are being blessed by God, oh, well, I got extra. I'm absolutely giving it to Yahweh. So it tells us a lot of stuff when we think about it. Questions, comments on this? Okay. Good question. All right. This was super interesting when I was looking at this. Like these are things I never even entered into my mind. But check this out. 99% of the bones that they found on Shiloh were from clean animals. Okay, no pigs or anything like that, all right? Oh, that's another data point. There was a group of people who only ate certain types of animals. Oh, I wonder who that was, right? Another piece of evidence that we have. This is interesting. Let's take a look at Leviticus. You guys are probably already reading this right now, but whatever. In Leviticus, Numbers, Leviticus 7. In verse 32. I don't know how many times I've read this in my life, but because it's probably getting into a deep dive into the sacrifices and stuff, it could just kind of glaze over, right? Particularly when I was young, I'm like sacrifice reading. But this is pretty interesting. In 32, actually verse 31. And the priest shall burn the fat upon the altar, but the breast shall be Aaron's and his sons. And the right shoulder shall ye give unto the priest for a heave offering for the sacrifices of your peace offerings. So the right shoulder, the right part of the animal was given to the priest. Well, let's take a look at this. Priest would eat the meat from the right side of the animal. Well, what do we find from the bones? 60% of the bones from this side are from the right side of animals. Okay, that's pretty interesting, right? That coincides with what the scripture is saying, that the priest would eat the right side of the animal. Well, we have 60% of the bones found in this area were from the right side of the different animals that were sacrificed. Okay? This is clearly a Hebrew site, brothers and sisters. Okay? Circular altar found as well as trash heaps of Israelite pottery. Pottery was all over, different types of shards. They would keep all kinds of things in these big giant jugs. These were all found in the early Iron Age level. What time? Oh, time period we've been talking about, right? 1100 to about 1000 BC. All right? It's all coming together. It's all coming together. So this was Samuel's world. He would have seen all of this. He grew up in this environment. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, all was not well with Eli and his family. Okay? We'll take a look at that in a minute. All right. This is what I was talking about here. This is a recreation of biblical Shiloh. And this is where kind of you had a wall situation, you had a gate. Look at all of these houses for the priests and other peoples. Here's the tabernacle right here. Okay, here's all of the storage sites all the way around here, different types of outbuildings, right? You know, altar horns and pomegranates, this is where all of these things were found, okay? So this is where the altar was, right here in the pomegranates. Clay walls, bone deposits was 4. This is where all the bone deposits were found, right here. And then there's like some disagreement. This fella, Dr. Stripling, says it's right here. The tabernacle is right here. My boy Finkelstein right here says it's right here. Well, whatever. And so, yeah, so this is the complex. And it was a very important complex. It was actually probably the most important site in during the time of the judges. All right. Let's talk about Hophni and Phinehas a little bit. 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter, gives us some insight into what was going on during this time. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 12. Now let's take a look at the language that the Bible uses here in describing Hophni and Phinehas. I think this is pretty interesting. Now the sons of Eli, this is in verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial, worthless, right? Wicked. They knew not the Lord. You're priests of Israel, you don't know the Lord, right? That's just very interesting to me. They didn't know the Lord, brothers and sisters, even though they're going through all of the rituals of the tabernacle, all of the rituals of the law of Moses. The Bible says, despite all of that, they knew not the Lord. The precepts and the commandments of God were not written on their heart. They were going through the motions of all of this. And they were using their position of power. Oh boy. They were using their positions of power for their own gain. What does it say? And the priest custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest servants came while the flesh was still in seething with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also before they burnt the fat, the priest servants came and said to the man that sacrificed, give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. Ooh. So now, they're taking animals, meat that was supposed to be set for God. They were taking it for themselves, and they said, we don't want any boiled meat, okay? We want to cook it raw. We want a nice barbecue, okay? That's how we like our meat. And so they wanted it raw before, which was not the way it was supposed to be, but that's the way they wanted to eat their meat. Now the biggest thing right here, in verse 16, and if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as I so desireth, they would say, nay, but thou shalt give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. So think about this. They're taking all of the this meat for themselves, and it has to be cooked the right way. It has to be raw. All this kind of stuff. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. They hated going there, brothers and sisters, because of the wickedness, and because they were robbing the people. They were taking things from the people. They were stealing from God as well. Okay? They were using their power for evil, for theft, to get more power and control. They're using force. They're using violence, right? I'll take it by force. You're going to get beat up, and we're going to take your sacrifice. It's wild. Now, verse 22 gets even worse, brothers and sisters. Now Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Okay? Immorality everywhere. A place that was supposed to be sacred, place was supposed to be dedicated to God. It was a place of worship. It was a place of faith and of hope. And what was happening there? Evil, wickedness, immorality. Samuel sees it all. He sees it all growing up. He sees all of this. Okay? And we want to give Eli some credit. He's an older man. These guys, his sons are completely out of control. He tries to talk some sense into them, but it didn't happen, right? And so this is kind of where we're setting it up. Taking the sacrifices for themselves, wanted the best part of the meat, as well as raw meat to roast, not boil, immorality. And so God sends a prophet to Eli to tell him how angry he is with his situation. In verse 29. Verse 27, actually, of the second chapter of 1 Samuel. And there came a man of God unto Eli and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Did I not plainly appear to the father when thou in Egypt in Pharaoh's house? So on and so forth. Verse 29. Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offerings, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people. That's some pretty harsh words, right, to Eli, particularly as we're going to find out that Eli was a large man, right? He actually literally had grown fat from the sacrifices, okay? It's one of the reasons why he's going to fall over when he hears the bad news, and all that body weight is going to break his neck. I mean, he was 99 years old, too. That didn't help. And so because of that, it says that his whole house would be destroyed. Verse 31, Behold, the days come that I will cut off thine arm and the arm of thy father's house, and there shall not be an old man in thine house. And verse 35, And I will raise me up a faithful priest that shall do according to that which is in my mind and in my heart, and I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. So there's a little foreshadowing there, isn't there? About some type of king priest that God is going to send, that is going to be a servant, that will keep his precepts and his commandments. Unfortunately, Eli's house is going to be destroyed because of the wickedness of his two sons, and because he didn't do anything about it. Right? Ophni and Phinehas should have been removed as priests, gone. And in fact, they probably should have been executed for what they were doing. But Eli just gave them a stern talking to, right? And we can understand that for those of us in the room that are parents or grandparents, right? Sometimes the love for our children can cloud our minds in kind of dealing with some tough situations, right? This was a tough situation for Eli. And it was complicated in his mind. And obviously he had love for his sons, and he was trying to talk some sense into them. They wouldn't listen. And so, unfortunately, it's going to bring destruction upon Eli and his whole house. And so I think there's a lesson there, brothers and sisters, when we're talking about our own lives and our own households and our own ecclesias. What type of environment is it? What type of environment are we showing in our homes and in our ecclesias for our children? Are we cutting corners? Are we using positions of power for our own gain? Are we lording it over the ecclesia? Are we lording it over our children and our wives, our husbands, whatever it is? What type of individuals are we? Are we separate? Do we separate ourselves for the things of God? Do we focus our hearts and our minds on the things of God? Or is our mind elsewhere? Are we doing things just to get through the motions? It happens to a lot of people. All right, so 1 Samuel 3, we kind of get to the meat of the story here. Even though they were practicing the rituals of the temple, direct contact with God was rare. And so this is going to be a very special occasion because Samuel was probably around 12 years old. He is going to become the mouthpiece for God, even though he was really just a young child, right? And so maybe this is a good lesson for the young people that are in the audience right now. You're never too old to do the right thing. All right? You're never too young to do the right thing. And so keep that in mind. Even though Samuel was only 12 years old, he still knew right from wrong. And he had an obligation to follow God. So Eli was old, he was nearly blind, and Samuel was kind of his helper, right? Samuel, come here, I need you to do this. Take my arm, Samuel, that type of thing. Okay, the lamp of the Lord had gone out. So that means that God appeared unto Samuel very late in the night. Okay? Now, some people have said that the lamp of God had gone out. In other words, that they weren't kind of, keeping up with that ritual. I don't believe that. I believe that it did go out every night, and they had to light it again. And so when they say that the lamp of God had gone out, the Bible is telling us about the time of the visitation of God to Samuel. It's not a commentary on the fact that it had gone out. It went out every day. Every night it went out eventually, and they had to light it again. Okay, so it's just telling us when God appeared unto Samuel. All right? Yahweh is going to call Samuel 3 times. And obviously Samuel had never really experienced direct communication with God. But he was ready for it, right? He listened. And he thought it was Eli, right? He thought it was Eli that was calling him. He was used to Eli calling him. All right? And so this happens three times, right? In verse 8, and Eli perceived, after the third time, Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. It only took 3 times, but that's all right. All right. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, go, lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, thou shalt say, speak, Lord, for thy servant hears. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And so that's exactly what Samuel does, right? He follows the instructions of Eli. He hears God call. He says, speak, Lord, for thy servant hears. Do we do that in our lives, brothers and sisters? Is that our attitude with God? Speak now, for your servant hears. Can we even hear God in this modern world? Sometimes it's very hard to hear God in this modern world. There are so many distractions for us that sometimes God just gets shut out in our lives. I know there's days in my own lives that I don't think about God. Like God is like, I don't think about him, or I don't pray during the day because I'm so consumed with the daily grind, with my job or whatever it is. And that's just not healthy spiritually. We always have to find time for God through prayer, always. And we have to be hearing what God has to say in our lives. Our eyes have to be open to the things that God is doing in our lives, right? Eli was blind. He was legitimately blind, literally blind, but spiritually he was blind as well. And it was really it's a metaphor, I think, for the children of Israel during this time. They were blinded. They were blinded by the things of Canaan. They were blinded by the Philistines and all the things that glittered along the coastline. So, Samson, drawn away by foreign women. It wasn't just Samson, brothers and sisters, either. It was a lot of Israelites that were drawn away at this time and lost. Okay? And so it was really up to this small group of people. I love that quote there where, remember Elijah, he's being chased by Ahab and Jezebel, and he goes into the wilderness, and he's just completely depressed, right? And he says, the Lord, let me die. I'm no better than my fathers. Completely depressed and despondent. And he goes through, right? They think there was an earthquake, and a fire, and a great wind, a storm, and that type of thing, great tempest. And the account says that God was not in any of those things. But then Elijah heard a still small voice, right? That's great. A still small voice. This tiny voice. And Elijah heard it because he was listening. Even though he wasn't in a great state of mind, he still could hear God. And what did God tell him? I have reserved unto myself 7,000 that have not bowed down to Baal nor kissed his image. And that's what Elijah needed to hear. He needed to hear those things, that there was still hope, that God has 7,000. Now, was it exactly 7,000? No, but it was representative of a core group of righteous individuals that were hanging on to the truth, that were hanging on to the things of God, despite all of the evil that was around them. They did not get distracted. And here is young Samuel, not distracted. His mind is tuned into the things of God, and that's why God spoke to him. So let's keep our eyes, let's keep our ears open to the things of God, brothers and sisters. Let's not be distracted about all of these things that will fade away. keep our hope on the things that matter, our salvation. And so he gives this awful this prophecy against Eli. And I think, poor Samuel, 12 years old, he's going to Eli, probably in his 80s or something like that, man of great stature, great power. And here's this 12-year-old, right? He's got to tell him that, I got some bad news for you, Eli. Your whole house is going to be gone. And Eli knew that, he says, don't leave anything out. Tell me exactly what God says. And Samuel does that. So that you have to have a little courage, right? A little bravery as a kid, 12-year-old kid going up to authority. There's a thing in American politics about, speaking truth to power. Well, guess what? Samuel was speaking truth to power in this situation. And he's going to be speaking truth to power through his whole life, right? He had to confront Saul numerous times about some crazy situations, right? That he was getting into. And so Samuel, in verse 19 of that third chapter, and Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did not let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again in Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of God. And so now Samuel is on the stage as the prophet. It's almost like this kind of, Samuel is going this way, Eli and his sons are going this way. One has been established by the word of God, the other has been cursed. And we're going to find out that that's exactly what happens. All right, I think we're going to end right on time. It's incredible. All right, so 1 Samuel 4 talks about a major battle between the Philistines. Right? It says, verse 1, and the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out against the Philistines to battle and pitched beside Ebenezer, and the Philistines pitched in Aphek. And the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel, and when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. So there's going to be this battle. Israel is going to lose, and there's going to be like a skirmish, right, and then another major battle. Anyways, the ark of the Lord, after this first loss, Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, they make the determination is like the reason we lost is we didn't have the ark, right? So we got to bring the ark out, and it's got to go with us in battle. Okay, sounds like a great idea. They think that because they have the ark, that God is going to be with them. But they were evil priests. God isn't going to be with evil priests. It's not going to happen. So the Israelites are going to go to battle again, this time with the ark of God, thinking that God is going to save them, give them victory. The very opposite happens. In fact, the Philistines are going to have this massive victory against Israel. The ark is going to be captured by the Philistines. When Eli hears about it, he's going to keel over and die. And Hophni and Phinehas are going to be killed as well. The evidence during this time tells us that Shiloh is going to be destroyed by the Philistines. Okay, so Shiloh is going to be destroyed at this time by the Philistines. Great calamity for the people. The glory of the Lord departs from Israel, right? The ark is taken. The place of worship in Shiloh is gone. The Philistines bring the ark down to Ashdod, a lot like how they brought Samson in, right? It's the same type of mentality. Into the temple of Dagon, was it a god of grain or fertility? Who knows? Was he half man, half fish deity? Again, who knows? And so, as we get in for our exhortation, brothers and sisters, we're going to take a look at the first king, Saul. We'll take some lessons from his life as well, and hopefully tie it all together. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening. I really had an enjoyable time putting this talk together. And you guys have been great. I appreciate all of your feedback, your comments, and look forward to the word of exhortation very soon.